Good Friday morning. As we begin this daily devotional, I have a confession. If you are looking for Thursday morning's devotional, you will not find it. I didn't sleep well on Wednesday night. I was up most of the night, and I kept having in my mind to find a quiet space to do the daily devotional between Wednesday night and Thursday morning, and that quiet space never appeared. And so I apologize to you. If you look for a daily devotional, you are missing yesterday. That's my confession, and I ask your forgiveness for that. But in a course of reconciliation, I am going to give you two people today. It is an intertwined story of characters that I think is very helpful as we think about how we might relate to them. The biblical book that comes after that of Judges is Ruth. Scholars place it usually right after the Judges, but some say it's after David. And the book opens up with an accolade to the fact that there were judges that were ruling and there was famine that was happening. So whether it chronologically actually appears after Judges or whether it's just for the sake of the canon that we have it after Judges, we're going to focus on Ruth and Naomi today. Ruth is the main character of the book for which she is named, Ruth. Naomi is the central character, because everything exists because of the interaction, the relationship between Naomi and her daughter-in-law. So in chapter 1 of Ruth, it opens up that there's a great famine that is happening in Bethlehem. Now, if you think about Israel, which is not a very wide country, it's about the width of Rhode Island, to the west of the Dead Sea, that's really the Holy Land. That's the Promised Land. That's the main area that God had promised to His people. To the east is all of these lands that are governed by other gods. And so the Israelites, even when they traveled up and down and back and forth, they usually tried to stay to the west of the Dead Sea, into that Promised Land where the 12 tribes of Israel spread out. Now, to the east of the Dead Sea, there actually were tribes of Israel that existed and settled, but this is the southernmost part of the west side of the Dead Sea is Moab. And this is where we get into the Amorites and the Hittites and all these different countries that are kind of on the fringe. Again, these are countries that the people didn't worship the Almighty, and so they were pagan-run countries. In this understanding of Ruth, we find Ruth and her family, Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, going to Moab, into a distant land to settle because of famine. And while they're there, they do something that Israelites typically don't do. They marry outside of their community. You would think that if they are settling there for famine, much of their other surrounding neighbors and community would have also traveled there to settle for famine. So we don't know why they married outside of their community, but they did. They have two sons. They marry outside of their community. Their daughters-in-law are Orpah and Ruth. We read in just the first few verses of chapter 1 of Ruth that they are there 10 years and there's no children, which is another interesting aspect to the story. For young married people, married together for 10 years, even in today's society, when I have had friends who have chosen not to have children in their life, or maybe they haven't been able to conceive children, they hate the stories or the questions that, after about 18 months of marriage, they are constantly asked. And they're asked usually about 10 years, are you ever going to have kids? And then after 10 years, there's kind of this mark where people stop asking. We don't know. It doesn't say that they're barren. It doesn't say that they can't have children or the Lord didn't bless them with children. We just know that there's two sons of Naomi. They both die, and they are childless. This is a big deal, again, if you remember how the ancient world existed. To have two sons was security. So Naomi had to have been looking at life thinking, okay, life is pretty good. We're not in Bethlehem. We're in this foreign country, but I have two sons. They're married. There's going to be offspring. My life is going to be taken care of. Well, unfortunately, that is not the case. We have Elimelech. This is Naomi's husband. He dies first. And then for whatever reason, the sons die. And they have left them without children. And the rest of chapter 2 is Naomi trying to care for Orpah And Ruth, in the same way, they're caring for her. Here we have 3 women, for whatever reason, probably aren't going to have any more children or haven't had any children at this point. There's an assumption being made. And so the best thing that Naomi can do for her daughters-in-law, because she can't care for them on her own, she's about to be desolate as well, she sends them back to their families. Maybe their families will take them back. Maybe they'll marry them off again. She doesn't have any other sons to pass the wives down to. So Naomi really pushes Orpah and Ruth to return to their families. Now, Orpah reluctantly goes. There's definitely a desire to care for one another, but in the end, Orpah knows that it is time for the daughters-in-law to return to their family. Naomi, however, cannot convince Ruth. In fact, in the middle of chapter 1 is this beautiful verse that a lot of people like to have read at their weddings. It's chapter 1, verse 16 that says, "Do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." So Ruth really is an outsider. She's not an Israelite. She's clearly outside of that. She doesn't really know the Almighty, which makes her even more of an outsider. And Naomi tries to send her to where she isn't an outsider, send her back to her home country, and Ruth says, "No, I'm staying with you." So Orpah goes back, and with Naomi's blessing, hoping that she will be married again and that her womb will be open and she'll have other children. Ruth stays with Naomi, and they move forward. There's a beautiful interaction between Ruth and Naomi in that Ruth is respecting Naomi in a way that is somewhat foreign. There had to be a certain sense of self-preservation. And so there's something about Naomi that Ruth is drawn to, that Ruth just has to stand by. Maybe she had this deep love for her husband, and that has created this sense of connection. Maybe her life in Moab wasn't all that great. We don't really know the underlying causes. And I think maybe in this story we can overthink why there was such a deep and beautiful connection between these 2 women, instead of just focusing on the fact that it was beautiful. Naomi cared for Ruth. Ruth cared for Naomi. So as they come back to Bethlehem, they are widows. They both are widows. They are without men, which means they're really without voice. And so they find land that is actually part of Naomi's husband, her passed away husband, Elimelech, and his name is Boaz. And so they find land. He's a kinsman, and they kind of settle on the outskirts. Boaz is a faithful, good man. He's from Bethlehem. He takes to liking Ruth, and Naomi notices it. As a good mother-in-law should, Naomi notices exactly what will help feed their bellies. And so Naomi encourages Ruth to find an interaction with the reapers. If you were a great landowner in Israel time, you had a responsibility to leave the edges so that those who were not as fortunate as you could come and glean for themselves. We call that tithing. So that idea of we have an abundance, we leave for those who are less fortunate than ourselves to tithe, to reap off of that abundance that's on the edge. So we have this story between Ruth and Naomi. Ruth ends up coming to Boaz, and Naomi has this kind of the scheme of how Ruth can create a relationship with Boaz. It's not done out of the scheme is not a negative connotation to it, but she says, lay at his feet after he has had wine, and Ruth doesn't. There's a different interaction. At any rate, Naomi and Ruth end up being taken care of by Boaz. Ruth is married to Boaz, and then they have family, and that becomes part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. So here's what I want to talk about with Naomi and Ruth. Can you relate to having a relationship that is life-giving? A relationship that isn't because of obligation, maybe started out of necessity, but it is a relationship in your life that you truly find hope and meaning when nothing else about this world gives you hope and meaning. I think about that with Ruth and Naomi. I think about the relationship they have with one another, whether it started out of obligation, started out of responsibility. It develops into something that is truly unique to this time in Israel's history, unique even to our world today. And I hope that as we listen to the story, as we think about the main character and the central character, the theme of Ruth, I hope what really speaks to us and maybe gets us thinking a little bit is, who is that relationship you have in your life that is really pushing you, is challenging you, is getting you to think about the choices you're making and the way you're living? Who is that relationship in your life that is standing by you no matter what? Even when everything else says you'd probably be better off going a different direction, you're going to stand by each other because you know that it is the right thing to do. Who is that relationship in your life that together you realize the work of God in this world and in your life? I think those are 3 points about the story of Ruth and Naomi that really can get us thinking about all of our relationships. They don't all have to be the same. They don't all have to have the same value. But I hope for you, as it is for me, there's at least one relationship that you have that is like Ruth and Naomi, that maybe started out of obligation or maybe started out of necessity, but has formed into something that is incredibly valuable. It really is life-giving and life-sustaining, but also holds wonderful beauty. Have a great end to your week. We do have a concert tonight at Our Savior's Bluegrass Gospel Band. It's called the Bethel Mountain Singers. They're going to be there from 7 to 8 tonight, and I can't wait to see you on Sunday.